So, hello to everybody. If you are new to this experience, welcome. I know this is a different time. There is probably less people available. You know, we're not all gathered around the same place at the same time like when Game of Thrones is on. And we're in a different era now. I mean, we're in a post Game of Thrones world. Feels very different. You know, it's like pre the McRib and then post the McRib, you know?
Interesting
Yeah.
analogy.
The world was never the same after the McRib.
Right,
you know?
right.
So that's kind of how I feel about it. And so today, the format is going to be fairly casual, and we're going to kind of go back over each character's kind of storyline from this season, kind of talk about our feelings about the show and how it ended in general. We're going to cover our death pool, just quickly go over the wins and losses, and how that worked out. We are also what else are we going to do? Is that it?
Yeah, again, like you said,
yeah.
very
Emails.
casual. We'll reference a couple emails. Focus on the chat. Let everybody vent. I'm sure everyone has strong feelings about this season. But yeah, in terms of the format, we'll go character by character. I think, not just for this season, but basically the series as a whole. Right? Like, where did they start? Where did they end up? You know, what was that journey like?
Yeah. So again, welcome. This I think will be a nice taste of kind of what we were doing in the live reaction shows, because this will be going live to everybody. Well, not live. It will be recorded and posted to the regular Game of Thrones Tower of Babel feed, like every other episode we do. But this live recording is private and it is a Patreon exclusive. Right. So if you are not a Patreon exclusive, you get an idea of what we kind of do behind the scenes with the Patreons. So patrons, right? Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Tower Babblecast, like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Tower Babblecast, and head over to towerbabble.ca to find everything that we do. That's really important. And yeah, patreon.com/Tower Babblecast. That's how you can get involved. All right, let's jump into this mess. Should we talk about some of the wider reactions to how this kind of played out?
Sure. It's been sort of 50-50, I think, largely across the board. A lot of people are very disappointed with this season for some obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we would, grand scheme of things, probably fall into that camp.
Mm.
Overall disappointment. I think in terms of like the last couple episodes, they kind of wrote themselves into a corner and did what they could.
Right.
There is some great character work, but just not enough of it to really validate some of the decisions that these characters made. So I think a lot of people are feeling that way as a result.
Yeah, and I think people might have taken it a little bit far with like the whole petition thing.
Yes.
So, and here's the thing: I have conflicted feelings about this because, on one hand, I feel like as the viewing public, as the general public, as the consumers of this stuff, I don't think we have the right to demand change from a creator. Right? They've made their decision and they're the be-all, end-all say of what that is going to be. And just because someone might disagree with it doesn't mean that that voice, that opinion is allowed to make that change. That's really, at the end of the day, it's up to the creator, right?
Yes.
On the other hand, right, I feel like when there is a situation like this where you have such a large number of people who feel a certain way, there should be some type of way for them to express their, in this case, disappointment to those creators, because it's not just a one-way street. You know, it's not just we make this, you watch it, and take what we give you. There's an organic kind of community and kind of a two-way, because the show doesn't exist without the fans, right? Who kind of made it the most popular show in the world.
Right.
And then you went and kind of pulled the rug out from under them in some ways. And I think they feel a little cheated, and they want to be able to, and they're looking for a venue to express, an outlet to express their frustration, and that was just happened to be an easy one.
Okay, and that part of it's perfectly valid. The creators do have an obligation to the fans to a degree, and fans have every right to voice their opinion. The petition itself, it's never going to happen. First of all,
Yeah, no.
and I don't like that populism side of things. Like, you don't get to just demand that they redo the show because you didn't like it. You're
Mhm.
allowed to say you didn't like it, and that's perfectly valid. But that's where it ends, right? No one's coming back to remake the show. The idea that was possible, doesn't make any sense. I'm not happy with the final, with the ending of the show as a whole. But at the same time, this is what we got. Let's talk about what we did get.
I find it so interesting that HBO knew. They said that going in that they knew that the ending would be divisive. I have a hard time believing that they didn't anticipate what was about to happen.
Well, here's the other thing with the show, or with anything that's this popular, you're gonna have opposing opinions, right? So no matter what, you weren't going to please anybody or everybody, rather. They did please some people. I think maybe they were relying on that a bit too much. That idea that we can't please everybody, so let's just make what we can. They probably could have put a bit more thought and depth into some of these character arcs, but again, this is what we got.
Yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse, right?
Which is, I think we said that almost every episode.
I just at this point though, it really feels like this should be the final. I guess let's make this the final statement on this issue of what was essentially a the unforced error that I keep talking about.
The thing is, Julian, it can't be a final statement. We're going to talk about each character arc. It's going to come up when we bring up Danny or Bran or something. The idea that they didn't flesh out these character choices, right? So just know that that's going to come up. Again, it's not fully an indictment. They're not bad people. We still have respect for everyone involved in the creation of the show. Of course, it's a difficult job. This is what they signed up for. All that kind of stuff. It's bound to come up. So that's just our general feelings about it.
Yeah, that's fair. Marcos is saying here in the chat room. Question: I do not think the petition was right at all, but when I hear people speak about it, I hear them say it's people whining about not getting the ending they wanted for their characters. To me, I feel it's that we had such a great show, and at this point, it's obvious that the writers took a stance that they wanted to rush through this and were left with this mess. And I think he's right. I think there's probably a large portion of people who sign that quote unquote petition, maybe feel like, oh, I didn't get the ending they wanted for the show. I think there is a more refined argument that's much closer to that I think a lot of people much closer to the fans of the show probably feel. And again, not knowing how to kind of express that.
Yeah, so there will be, and it's happened with plenty of other TV shows as well. People get mad that a character gets killed off and write a petition.
Right.
They're not seeing the ending that they want. That's somewhat different than what we got here in terms of the just the quality of the show, really.
Right. Because I think the ending was going to be very similar. Like I know, let's just say this is 2 years from now and there's another 2 more seasons. I think the ending would be very similar to what we got.
It would be. It would just have been a bit more. It would have taken longer, and they would have really developed it. Right.
The final episode might have been even almost exactly the same. Like
potentially, yeah.
So, there's that, right? But I guess I feel like I even though I don't agree with it, I understand it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Where should we take it from this? Do we want to do our death pool? We were supposed to do it at the end of last week's episode, but we were going at it was like 2 hours, 40 minutes at that point, and it really felt like we were holding people hostage. So I think it's fair that we do it now, kind of off the top here. So let's see here. Let's start at the very tippy top and let's count the points when we get to the end. Okay.
Sure.
So we start with Jon Snow. I had him dead. What did you have him as?
Had him alive.
You had him alive. So well,
Boom.
I did not get a point there.
1-0.
Okay. Sansa, I had her alive.
We both did, yeah.
Okay. So I got a point there. Arya Stark, I had her dead.
We both had her dead. We're both wrong.
We're both wrong. All right. Brandon Stark, I had him alive.
Interesting. I had him dead.
Okay. Point for me.
Tied up. Okay.
This is close. I know. It's exhilarating. Cersei Lannister, I had her dead.
Everybody in the world had her dead.
Yeah.
And everybody was right.
Yep. Everybody in the world. Jamie. No, there are some people out there who are Cersei fans.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Well, I mean, again, I think I brought this up in previous seasons. My youngest sister, Alana, is a fan of Cersei, or at least was at one point, and her only justification for that was because she's a boss ass bitch.
Which doesn't really mean anything, right?
But it certainly makes, like, I hear that and I think it's Cersei. She is that.
Yeah, but that's not a good thing, right? Like,
she knows what she wants and she gets what she wants. I guess I don't know. I'm grasping at straws here.
No. She's a villain. She's a bad person.
Certainly was a villain.
Yeah. So okay, Jaime Lannister had him dead.
Yep.
Okay, so we're at 4 points each then. I believe the tally is.
Yep.
Tyrion, I had him alive.
Me too.
Okay, so far so good. Daenerys Targaryen, I had her alive.
Interesting choice because I had her dead.
Mm.
And it's almost like Jon and Daenerys were like the main ones, right? Like the most important ones.
Right. So we swapped on that. That's okay. Didn't get a point there. Jorah Mormont, I had him dead.
We both had him dead, and we added a column to our
to White Walker.
I had him turn into a White Walker, which didn't happen for any. Oh, it happened for Ed Tollett. That's about it, I think.
Yeah, did we put that down for Ed? We didn't even put it down for Ed, which is kind of a missed opportunity.
You still get points for the dead Jorah. You don't get points for a White Walker Jorah.
Right. Varys, I had him dead.
Dead?
Yeah. Grey Worm, I had him dead. Didn't get a point there.
I also had him dead. I was very surprised with that.
Okay. Then we have Missandei, had her dead.
Yep.
Okay. Euron Greyjoy had him dead.
He had to die.
Yeah, he had to. Absolutely. There's no question. He should have died a long time ago, really, in my opinion. Or never been invented for the show. Theon, I had him dead.
Also dead.
I'm at 10 points here. Yara, I had her dead.
I thought she was going to be the first one to die this season.
Yeah, we both kind of did. So she's still alive. So we did not get a point there. Lyanna, I had her alive. I think I was just wishing it.
Yeah, we thought that character had plot armor, had just not even plot armor, had just popularity armor.
So it's funny because of that is the reason they killed her. Because they used that popularity as like a manipulation tool to make us care about what happened at the Battle of Winterfell.
Right.
So I guess whoop-de-doo. Congratulations, many of them. It worked, but
she had also
she had a cool death.
One of the coolest deaths imaginable.
Yeah, very cool. Anyway, we didn't get a point for that. I crossed off Mira and Howland Reed, so they don't count.
I'm taking points for both of them because they're still alive.
You can't take points for those. You can't take points for those. There's no confirmation either here or there.
They're on the sheet though, so
yeah, but you made the sheet.
It's out of my hands at this point. They're on the sheet. I'm going to take points for them.
No, you don't get to take points. Well, if you get to take points for them, I get to take points for them.
Well, did you have them dead or alive?
I had them both dead because they're not on the show.
Well, then you don't get points.
We don't know. How do you know? People think that there's that guy at the end.
I do think that's Howland Reed.
But we don't know. But there's no confirmation.
World,
but there's no confirmation though, right? So we can't. You can't take points then.
We'll see.
You could have died of old age before this even happened.
We'll see what happens. Let's just keep going.
If you have an extra 2 points on there, it's going to be bullshit. I'm going to put myself down for 2 because I think you're cheating.
Okay. That's not cheating.
Yep.
Okay, whatever.
Samwell Tarly, I had him alive.
We forgot about Quaithe. I got points for Quaithe as well.
Okay, I'm going to also put down one there for Quaithe. Samwell Tarly.
Did you have her dead or alive?
I had her alive.
Okay, so we're both right.
All right, you're an idiot.
Theoretically.
This isn't a theoretical game. There's Samwell Tarly alive.
Yep.
Gilly alive. Gendry dead. Got no points for that.
Yeah, that's wrong. We're both wrong there. Yeah.
Sandor dead. Yes. Gregor dead. Yes.
Of course.
Qyburn dead.
Had to die.
Absolutely. Brienne of Tarth alive.
See, I had her dead too.
Oh, there you go. I got a point for that one. Tied it back up.
I think it's gonna switch right away because I had Pod alive and you had him dead.
Oh, did I? Yeah, I did have Pod dead. So, and you have him alive.
Right.
Okay. So you took the lead again. Dolores Ed dead. Beric Dondarrion dead.
For sure dead.
Yeah. Melisandre dead. There's a lot of dead ones. Robin Arryn alive.
You missed Tormund.
Oh, Tormund.
Tormund is alive.
Yeah,
I had him dead.
I also had him dead, and a White Walker. We were wrong on that one too. Then we have Rob and Aaron alive. So, do you have Rob and Aaron as
I
alive?
had him dead. I couldn't imagine that kid surviving.
But
Interesting.
interesting.
A ride from the Erie down to King's Landing, let alone.
No, he's really matured. Davos. I had Davos dead.
I also did.
Braun. I had him dead.
That's crazy. Yeah, that Braun survived.
Not only did he survive, Daniel, he gets to be the master of coin.
He won. He got the most happy ending out of any character on the show. Like he got his perfect ending.
Yeah, it's not fair, really.
Maybe Sam got to be a maester, but like other than that, everyone got like a half. Like nobody's exactly happy. Nobody's.
I don't know. Sansa's also queen in the north.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess she got a happy ending too. But it's bittersweet because the family's sundered. And,
yeah, well,
she has
all
the sacrifices.
She has to lie on the bed she made. So,
yeah.
Okay. Davos, Braun, Drogon. I had Drogon dead.
I had assumed all the dragons were gonna die. So.
We got points for Rhaegal and did we actually? Did you only put Drogon and Rhaegal on here?
Yeah, Viserion died last season.
Right. Anyway, we got a point for Rhaegal anyway. I thought Ghost would die, and I thought we were right with that one.
Close.
And then turns out I was wrong. So no points for that.
Ran off into the darkness for a couple episodes and then showed up.
No, he was back the next episode.
Was it the next episode? Yeah.
Then we had the Clegane Bowl. I don't remember. I wrote all possible possibilities on here, and I don't remember which one I actually picked. So I'm just going to give myself a point.
Yeah, turns out it's hard not to get points.
And then we have the Iron Throne. I had that for Danny. I did not have destroyed and melted as an option. Should have probably put that down.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, I had said nobody, but I didn't write down what I thought. Right. Nobody imagined that necessarily Drogon would.
So we all get points. And then Deus Ex Machina, I think I said there would be. There wasn't.
Not really.
No. And then Ice Spiders. Also no.
No giant ice spiders.
You really feel like that was a missed opportunity?
It's crazy.
I don't know if that's described.
I don't imagine that'll be featured in the books either. Whereas a lot of this other stuff would be, Howland and Quaithe and whatever. The ice spiders is like in my mind an example of this legend sort of growing out of control. So there is some truth to the legend of the White Walkers. Obviously, right. The ice spiders is an affectation that's been applied later on, just to scare children, and it's become part of the legend. So I don't think we'll see them in the show. Or in the books, rather.
Yeah.
Much like Snarks and Grumpkins. Like those are the things that are made up to scare kids.
Huffalumps and Woozles.
Exactly. And then there are true legends that are also that are rooted in truth.
Right.
But they all kind of sound the same.
Okay. Marcos is asking if we're going to touch on the alternate ending they said that they wrote. I don't know enough about that alternate ending. They probably wrote it, probably shot a bunch of stuff to put people off the scent so that people didn't reveal the ending and didn't know what was the right one. But I don't know enough about that to comment on it. So if there is more information, feel free to put it in the chat and we'll comment on it. But I have no idea.
Yeah, no. I know that they were, like you said, sort of writing like false endings just to for the last couple episodes, only certain people were allowed on set. Only certain people got the right copy of the script, all that kind of stuff. Because, as much as everyone's committed to the show, even the cast and crew are capable of letting something slip.
Yeah. Speaking of the cast, those interviews that they gave leading into during the final season sure take on a different flavor once you've seen the finale. Right. You go back and watch them, and there's that one with Peter Dinklage where he looks like he's there's a red dot on his forehead, and
I mean a lot of these are not necessarily taken out of context, but it's hard. You do a million. They do a million of these interviews, so somebody's putting together clips of them.
Have you seen that one with Danny though, where they asked her straight up what she think of the last season, or with
no, I haven't.
No. It's not great. Thing is, they have strong feelings, but they can't say them, so they have to cover them up with these weird emotional tics, and it's telling. I think I don't think it's just a coincidence.
Yeah.
Mark was also asking if we have the butterflies that will kill the Unsullied when they get to North.
Yeah.
On our death pool. No, we didn't put that on there. But okay, yeah, explain that again.
So the Isle of Noth, I think we've talked about it before. It's where Missandei's from. It's a very peaceful culture. You know, they have no weapons, nothing like that. And they live with butterflies. There's a lot of butterflies on their island. They love butterflies. They're often victimized by corsairs and slavers and stolen, taken, thrown into slavery, all that kind of stuff. And they don't fight back. But any invading army that ever tries to land and like establish a base of operations or a town or city there, they all end up dying of mysterious diseases. Just their physiology can't work with that island. So they're protected in that sense, the Nathi, but they aren't protected from being abducted and sold into slavery.
So they'll likely die when they get
a lot of the Unsullied, except for the ones that are Nathi, theoretically. Unless maybe the people of Nath, once they have these protectors, have some sort of medicine.
Maybe it could be magic.
Where there's no way to know, but it's all hypothetical at this point. But
also, we'll never know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they create some sort of butterfly poultice and apply it to all the Unsullied, and it's fine.
Okay. That sounds like either way they get a nice ending. The Unsullied.
I like the idea of Grey Worm specifically taking them down there for Missandei to protect her people.
I didn't like when they first talked about it, the way it was executed. It was I don't know what it was, like a weird line reading or like a strange dialogue choice.
It was. That was one of the ones that was written by a robot.
Yeah, right. Which they used to save time, so they didn't have to spend all the time writing the entire script. They just plugged in the key plot points and they generated the rest with a script generator.
I don't remember the exact line, but I remember it being a non sequitur.
Right. Something like "we will protect you," or like then we will be. I don't remember what it is now.
It went from them talking about themselves and the situation that they were facing, and then her just saying, "My people have no protection," like something like that, like something that was just like spoon feeding it in,
right? So that way they could set up this finale. Yeah. That was literally only there for that one. For that final shot.
And that's a good example. That's obviously a microcosm of a macro issue, but like that's an example of them. They know what the ending is. They don't know how to get themselves there in an effective way within the amount of time that they have. Right.
Right. What was that video that you posted in the Slack? Who was that from? What was it? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't remember off the top of my head. It's I think it was Screen Rant, and they do these. This one guy, or it's probably a group of people, but one guy does a fake pitch meeting where on one side he's the writer, on the other side he's the exec, and they're pitching the season. It's pretty funny.
It is very funny. There's a lot of parts where like the exec is like, okay, but you set this up, and so that's gonna pay off. Like he's like, nope. Why? He's like, oh, we don't have time.
But you can have more time.
But you can have more time. Do you want more time? Like more seasons? You got more time. More seasons? Nope. We don't. There's nothing we can do. This is how it's got to be. Right. It's out of our hands. Okay. So that was the death pool. Who won? I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 23 points.
I also got 23. That's crazy.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, actually, it's not crazy because I think we were mostly the same except for Danny and John, and we exchanged a couple other ones. So I got 23 out of 38 is what I have
It's a tie. 23 out of 30. Well, and you included all 38 on the thing, right? Of course you did. So that's good. You know, that's a nice.
Yeah.
No one wins.
Well, someone else who filled out their own may have won.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, if you got more than 23 points, please let us know, and we'll send you a T-shirt.
You send a screenshot of your unedited. No,
that's right. Kidding. We will we will validate it. We will confirm the numbers, and then if you are the winner, we will send you a T-shirt. I think that's a fair trade. This is a live podcast, and I'm making this decision now. And Daniel doesn't
really should have thought about it first.
But okay, sorry. You have to have the most amount of points. You can't just have more than 23. You have to, like, if you have more than 23 and you send in something and someone has something more than that, that person gets a T-shirt. So only one person gets a T-shirt.
And it would have to have been submitted before we started the season, right? The death pool before episode 2.
Right, yeah, because otherwise how would we validate that?
Yeah, you got to think before
you know what? You know what? You're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That's my bad. Okay. Do you want to do character by character now?
Yeah, let's go. We have a sheet here with characters. We're not going to do all 38 as much as I would love to.
Yeah. What do you think happened to Quaithe, Daniel?
I think genuinely, I think Quaithe is
Oh my God, hilarious.
Quaithe is going to be a larger player in the book. She's a big part of Dany's story. She pops up like occasionally. It's not just in season 2 or book 2. She comes back and forth, and she's always giving Dany these sort of prophetic visions and trying to guide her in some sense. She's a shadow binder. She's from a shy,
What does a shadow binder mean?
Similar to Melisandre,
Mm.
she uses the shadow, right? The shadow babies, and
Right,
whatnot.
right, okay.
That's a form of blood magic. So she's a shadow binder from a shy. Melisandre's a red priest, but she has training in other. She's
okay.
also from a shy. So as much as I'm pretty sure George Martin has said a shy itself will not be featured in the books, or
Right.
at least in the main story, I think Quaithe will have a larger role to play.
Okay.
In the show, obviously, that got thrown out the window.
Yeah, I was joking when I asked you that question.
I know.
Okay, let's start with. Do we want to start with Jon, or do we want to like work our way there?
We might as well just go in order here because
Yeah.
we have the sheet
Okay.
in front of us.
So Jon Snow, he ends in. Let's say Sam in the chat room says they forgot about Quaithe same way they did with the comet.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I think the comet had played whatever role it was going to play.
Well, it was weird, and it's weird in the books because it's sort of this symbolic thing, and everybody chooses how to interpret it. Everybody across the world, so everyone's seeing this comet. No, like who knows what's going to happen with it? I don't know that the comet's going to hit the Earth in book 7.
Right, exactly. That's like
dragons and spring out.
Right,
but I don't know. It does feel like it should have had some larger significance as well.
But maybe that's just us reading into it. Maybe that's one of those things where like that one was never supposed to be super important, but it was used as a kind of just a storytelling device, and like often was like I think they did a couple times where they would just like pan from the meteor down.
What they did, if I remember correctly, and we did just do a season 2 rewatch, so we should have a better memory of this.
Yeah.
There would be times when somebody would reference the comet, and then we would get a shot of the comet, and then pan down, and now you're in a new location.
Yeah.
So they used it as a segue quite a bit.
Yeah. But I mean, again, it's referenced or shown again in the season 8 opening credits on the I don't know what you'd call it. What do you have when you have those planets hanging down on a mobile?
Yeah,
is that what it's called?
Yeah.
So it's like that. It's so there's the mother dragons and the comets overhead in that little image in the opening credits. So it's not like it was completely forgotten about.
But the weird thing about the comet for me, it's crazy that we're spending this much time on it, is even in the books, in all the previous writings, there really isn't much talk of any other comets. So this one has significance. It's distinct. People, it's been pointed out.
It's like Halley's Comet in the
real world, is what you're saying?
Because that one is a recurring one that we see every whatever.
Yeah, most
years.
star. But so it's a cyclical thing. I don't know what in terms of what it symbolizes for the show in terms of like resurgence of magic. That's the way a lot of us interpreted it initially.
I think that's what they're trying to say too when they have the dragons and the thing and again in the season 8 credits, opening credits. I think that's what they're trying to say. But anyway, that's a lot to talk about a comment. All right, let's start with Jon Snow. Jon Snow, he doesn't get a happy ending, but it's also not a terrible ending, right?
All things considered, especially what he did at the end, he basically does get a happy ending.
What about the argument that like even though he killed Dany, he's still technically the rightful ruler and like
so he's been very clear this season that he didn't want to be the ruler.
Right.
And they didn't release that information publicly, which I'm very surprised that didn't happen.
I thought it was. I thought that was the whole point. Unless the whole point of showing us Varys burning that letter was to show that he didn't get any letters.
That has to be the idea because it's not brought up in that council. Right?
Yeah.
That you would think somebody would have said something there. Now Sansa does know.
Sansa knows. Tyrion knows. Bran knows. Sam knows. There's a bunch of people.
Yeah, it's almost 50%. Howland Reed knows, and he's there for sure. So.
Yeah, he doesn't say exactly. That would have been a great time for him to, if that was actually Howland Reed, for him to say something.
Chime in.
Yeah, but I think that's a confirmation that it's not Howland Reed.
Yeah, no, it's Jon is probably arguably the main character of the show. All things
I would
considered.
say so. Yeah.
He didn't really have a lot to do this season, surprisingly. The battle for the night, of course, but he even in that battle, he didn't really do that much. He was sort of sidelined, except for when he tried to face the Night King and
he got like
fade to black after a bunch. He got swarmed by a bunch of zombies, and then he faced the dragon as well. But other than that, the battle wasn't really about him.
Yeah.
It was more, even Grey Worm had a larger role to play, I would say.
In the final, in the entire, in that battle. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I think that idea was for that. Okay. Let me put it this way. I think that thematically, I think it would be more satisfying to have Jon have killed the Night King.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that the creators really loved the idea of Arya killing the Night King, and they said they decided on that like 4 years ago.
Right.
Because I guess they really liked that payoff of Arya training to become an assassin and then subverting what your expectations are and having her do it instead of Jon. So I get that, and I think that is actually fairly satisfying, at least from the Arya perspective. I just don't know if by not giving it to Jon and giving it to Arya, like, is that trade worth it?
Right.
So yes, Arya gets a more satisfying kind of story arc and conclusion to her kind of training and spending all that time there, which I don't understand when people are like, what was the point of all that? That was the point of all that.
Yeah, the point was that she just became a badass in every form of martial arts, essentially, right? That's the way to interpret that. Right? Any form of weapons combat.
Right.
To me, we're talking about Jon right now. We'll talk about Arya later, but her storyline it never had anything to do with the Long Night. It was more personal for her, right? It was more about her list, and it was more about herself and the darkness within her. So again, this is sort of a last minute thing where she comes in and saves the day.
Like someone stole Jon's kill. Like it's like
yeah, almost like
yeah, but I guess at the end, like they're all invested in it at the end because
everybody is by nature.
Yeah, so it's like, oh well, and obviously the writers can do whatever they want. They could have written it anyway, and so. Yeah, I think if I was writing it, I think I would have had Jon kill the Night King.
It really seems like that's what his character.
And there would have been a
cool
fight, like sword fight, maybe but we don't even get that.
I mean, I get it. So that's too Hollywood, right? That's not what they're going for with this story,
right? That's fair.
Anyway, so in terms of Jon's character overall, I would say arguably between him and Dany, the main character, and Tyrion, probably the main character of the show. There's between those three.
Mm-hmm.
He had some great development in previous seasons. This season, he didn't really have as much to do. It was his confliction over his quote unquote love for Dany,
which was never established very well.
Whatever. So, but that's a fact of this season, right? So he's in love with Dany, but then he's also seeing what she's become. That's a super interesting dynamic for that character.
And never properly explored.
And so he has to explore. He has to process these things, much like Ned Stark was torn. And in the end, he does choose to sacrifice his honor, right? Like that wasn't an honorable act. Never once is he called a Queenslayer after that, although he did essentially the same thing Jaime did.
Oh, maybe he is, but maybe not by those people.
Right. So I imagine that I like the idea of Jon sacrificing his honor for the greater good and living with the consequences of it. Like that's a satisfying payoff. That's him being Ned Stark as well.
Mm-hmm.
Ned told the world that he had that bastard, sacrificed his honor, albeit on a much smaller scale.
Right.
But no, he's the only one who knew the truth, really,
mm-hmm.
and he was able to live with that.
But in this case, he went and told everybody what he did
because he knew it would be a slight on his honor, and he did it anyways.
Even in that video that is the Screen Rant one, he's like. So I guess he just goes and turns himself in. Presumably, yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah,
we don't know, but yeah, I guess. In the chat room, there's a conversation about whether what was Maester Aemon's relationship to Jon. Like, how does that family tree work?
Oh God. So Aemon, I got to draw it here.
You're gonna write it down. Okay.
So Maester Aemon is the older brother of Aegon the Fifth, Aegon the Unlikely, who's the fourth son of a fourth son. Aegon, who married for love, allowed his children to marry for love. Jaehaerys was Aegon's son, so it would have been Aemon's nephew. Then after him was Aerys, who would have been Aemon's grandnephew or great nephew.
Okay,
right, grandnephew. So then Aerys had Rhaegar,
mm-hmm.
so that would have been his great nephew, and then Jon is technically Rhaegar's son, so it would have been his three great nephews.
You don't see that happen very often,
I believe,
right?
Unless there's like one, there's no removed because it is a direct line. It's
right.
just a nephew and then a couple steps down. I'm pretty sure about that.
Okay. I think that's fair. I don't know. I basically wasn't able to follow what you were saying most of the time. So that sounds right. All right. Anything else you want to say about Jon? I think I I really liked the moments at the end where he asked Tyrion like if he did the right thing. That it's such an open ended question, and I think that he's maybe I'm kind of playing this up a bit, but maybe that's a question that he's asking the audience, a little bit, like,
Maybe.
right? And I guess in your opinion, it was his decision to kill Dany there the right decision.
Uh, I think so. I think she had clearly taken a turn and she wasn't coming back, and she didn't feel any remorse for what she did. It was all in her mind for the greater good. And she was clearly planning on expanding and continuing that trend. So um, he, for John, it was a huge sacrifice, but it was for, in his mind, the greater good, right? So
Mhm.
there's a philosophical argument there, but he probably saved a lot of lives by doing that.
Yeah. I guess the question is what's right and what's wrong, right? Is it right to kill your queen, to kill your aunt? No, right? But there's more to it than that. So
It's so weird, and it is a really difficult ethical question because the idea that he is performing this act, murder,
yeah,
right? Obviously, an immoral act.
yep,
Doing it to save lives. So the idea there is it's better to kill her now and save X amount of people down the road. But
right,
that's kind of the way that she justifies her actions. Is it's better to kill all these people now to save X amount more down
right.
the road. So they're kind of on a weird ethical scale making a similar decision.
It's like it like balances out.
I
Like
don't know.
it's the like sacrifice the few for the lives of the many kind of thing.
Right.
But hers was sacrifice the many for the many more, which is a kind of a different argument, right?
Well, as far as I, haven't put a ton of thought into this, but as far as I can see right now, it's only a difference of scale.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, yes and no, because I think killing Dany changes like like the butterfly effect from killing Dany is a lot larger. Like if she's allowed to go unchecked,
Yeah.
right? That really the effects on the greater world is like are
Yeah. But again, that's still a difference of scale. Now, the one thing in my mind that's different is Dany has already acted, so she's already committed atrocities.
right.
Those people in King's Landing, obviously not all of them, but mostly were innocent.
So it could be viewed as justice,
Could potentially be viewed that way. Yeah.
right?
So he knows for a fact that she'll continue to do that, whereas Dany doesn't know for a fact that her doing this will save lives down the road, right?
Mhm.
So it's more in my mind a question of intent at that point. So
It's taking it's removing the unknown or the known unknown, basically. So, all right. I think we talked about John long enough for somebody who is, as Benny described, a wet blanket
Yeah.
of a character. And I feel bad for it because I really like John as a character because I like the conflicted nature of him and just generally struggling with what his duty, and he's had to do it his entire life, right? And then even when he does find out his true parentage, he's still not able to kind of like embrace it.
right.
So I don't know.
Not only that, and we'll find with a lot of these characters, in many ways, this is sort of a larger theme of the show. They start off as the marginalized characters. He's a bastard. He's looked upon differently than his brothers and sisters. Sort of like a second tier citizen, sort of the second class citizen sort of thing. And then he has a larger destiny. He becomes something new. We could go down the list, and I think they all have pieces of that in their character, but he's
Yeah.
one of the main ones. Cripples, bastards, broken things. That's a season 1 line.
Yeah.
But that's what his and Tyrion's story are really about.
There's a there's a what if scenario being played out in the chat room right here. Is if John had went to kill Grey Worm after having killed Dany for being her Gestapo, essentially.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah. So who would win? And then also in front of a molten iron throne, and like, yeah. So that'd be cool. Okay, let's play this out. What if scenario? Who wins in a one-on-one, John and Grey Worm? Probably Grey Worm, right?
I think it's tough. So Grey Worm's probably he's definitely the better trained fighter. They have different techniques, obviously. I think in the show they really played John up and made him into more of a fighter.
Yeah.
And he is in the books too. He does train new recruits, and he is a good sword fighter, but he's not top tier. We've always had this discussion about there is a certain tier of people. Jaime Lannister is on that tier.
Was on that tier
when he had his hand. I'm not sure that even Grey Worm would be on that top tier.
Well,
but in terms
yeah.
of John's fighting ability in the books, like he loses to Mance Rayder. So
Right.
that's his area.
Yeah, but we're also talking about the show, so.
Yeah.
I mean, like based on what we've seen in the show, he probably could hold his own, I think, with Grey Worm. I'm surprised like he didn't have to. Like Grey Worm had seemed like he had gone full bloodlust, you know? And like different in a different way than Dany. I think and just kind of skipping to Grey Worm here. I think Grey Worm understood his actions in a different way than Dany did, and he justifies it with "I'm just following orders." But I think he was, from the way I saw it, was he was using those "I'm just following orders" as an excuse to kind of express his rage and anger.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
But for him, it is much more simple. He gets to simplify the world because he's following orders, and the Unsullied in general, they as a result of the way that they're trained, they kind of have a one-track mind. It's this, we're going this way or this way, X or Y. And he never questions his own actions. He just does what he's told. That's how he's trained, right? And now that he's in control of the Unsullied, he can just make essentially unilateral decision and forge ahead. He's not going to question his decision.
But he's been in that general position for a long time. It's someone who is able to make some of his own decisions.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, for sure.
So
it is something that's been pointed out. Again, I guess we're skipping to Grey Worm here. It is kind of tragic for his character as well, who was a heroic character for most of the series, to again last minute turn into essentially a villain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he has a similar, like we make the joke that like the Star Wars references, but like he has a similar like Anakin arc, right? Where he feels like he lets his rage kind of take over, and then he's just quote unquote following orders after that,
right?
But it's hard to make that same analogy for Dany and the Emperor, who's like scheming the entire time. It's not really the same. Okay, Marcos is asking, Daniel or me, if you have time, could you do what you just alluded to? What are the fighter tiers and what we have and who's in them? I guess who's left, like out of who's left alive at the end of the show?
Not many are left alive at the end of the show. I like to do it whenever I think about it from, let's start season 1, and that's it. Like who at the time that everything started, essentially, right? So there was a status quo at that point, and there were top tier fighters. So off the top of my head, Barristan Selmy is for sure on that list.
Mm-hmm.
Jaime Lannister has to be on that list. Khal Drogo would have been on that list, although he hasn't been tested in the same way. He's clearly one of the best fighters in the world. Areo Hota, who was protecting the Prince of Dorne.
Right.
We don't really get to see him, but he
dies like a chump in this show.
He does, but I feel like it's in season either 4 or 5. It's probably 5, where he, captures Jaime and he says, "When you were whole, it would have been a good fight." Like that, I love that line because that character in the books is really cool and one of the top tier fighters. I would throw Oberyn Martell on that list.
Sure.
The Red Viper. Obviously, the Hound and the Mountain have to be on that list in terms of sheer strength and fighting abilities.
Yep.
The rest of the Kingsguard, probably not top tier.
No.
Meryn Trant, Boris Blount, Mandon Moore. They're more political pieces than anything else. I don't think Jon or Ned or Robb are on that list.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I mean, we see Ned in his prime in that flashback essentially lose to the to what's his name?
Sword in the Morning, Arthur Dayne. So that might be it for top tier at the time of the show started. Maybe some people might put Loras Tyrell. Oh, Brienne of Tarth. Brienne is clearly a capable fighter. She's up there. And then from the books, Lynn Corbray it would be on that list. And
you just made that name up. No. You could have just made that name up, but I wouldn't even know.
What's his name? Loras Tyrell's older brother is on that list. He's a better fighter.
Okay, cool.
Don't remember his name off the top of my head.
And he's just not in the show?
Not in the show. They sort of, there's a couple of Tyrell brothers, and they kind of amalgamated them all into Loras because it does make sense. That's a better way to streamline the show. Yeah. It makes a more effective story.
Not every family needs like 15 kids in it.
Yeah, you know what? Speaking of that, I might throw Victorian Greyjoy on that list. Who's also not in the show.
Also, could have made that name up. One of those names Daniel said is made up. It's up to you to figure out who. Okay. Let's talk about Sansa. Now, I feel a little vindicated, and only because one person. Normally, people write in to tell me I'm wrong. It's generally
They don't write it to tell you you're wrong as much as I'm right.
no. They write it to disagree with my opinion. Whatever. We did have. I don't know if you have it like.
I can pull it
on
up.
hand.
I haven't responded yet, but I will. It's from Raphael, who
And-
often contributes with emails.
Right.
It's been fun.
And basically, if you recall, the conversation we had last week, and I kind of walked through how I thought that Sansa has to wear some of the blame for what happens in the final moments of the show, and that a lot of it was orchestrated by her, and it was done knowingly. And you argued that because Dany was able to make this choice entirely on her own, that Sansa doesn't wear any of that blame, and I just didn't agree with that. And we had someone write in who agreed.
Yeah, so Raphael also agrees with you that Sansa bears some portion of the blame, although he does mention that it is Dany's decision. She has to own that. Sansa, she to a degree knew what she was doing. She ostensibly Daenerys was her queen, and she was being openly defiant of her.
Yeah,
and antagonistic.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so she was really,
which I found very frustrating for the entire season. And it was hard to,
and again, just to paraphrase the email, like, he makes a good point. Like, she wasn't being very subtle, and having been trained by Littlefinger, say what you will about it, but that's where she took a lot of her lessons. Right, she probably should have been more subtle and at least tried to find a way to work with Dany with her own interests in mind still. Right,
Mm-hmm.
so she wasn't making a lot of very political decisions. She was just being openly defiant and just rubbing Dany the wrong way. So it certainly contributed to what Dany did.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that is true. It was an ethical argument that we were having at the time, and all I'm saying is you can't make excuses for what Dany did. It is still her decision at the end of the day.
Yeah,
And she owns 100% of it. Sansa contributed. Sansa didn't know this would happen. She didn't orchestrate this.
No, she didn't know. But the thing is, she put in motion events that led to what was eventually what she wanted to be a coup, right? She wanted a coup to happen. She wanted Jon in power, and she wanted the North to be free. And I think she was willing to make whatever decision that she had to do whatever she had to do to make that happen,
right?
Including having burned down half of King's Landing, which she never really cared for much to begin with.
Yeah, I don't think that Sansa's going to lose any sleep over what happened. And I don't think that she's an innocent character in any sense. She's become a political player, and this is how she chose to act. That's just in terms of that one decision. That's what we were focusing on last time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the idea that you can take something that happened to you and use that to justify your actions later on, right? And people do it all the time. And I think that that's a mistake. You have to, your trauma or anything that's happened to you doesn't define your decisions. It might affect your decisions.
It's like the Magneto thing.
It's an explanation. It's not an excuse.
Right. Again, but okay. Let's put it this way: if we're using the Magneto example, so
I guess we are. Because
I'm gonna use the Magneto example. So Magneto is a complicated character in the comics, but if you want to simplify him down, he was, I put it mildly, treated poorly as a boy, right?
Right. Concentration
camps, and then the whole mutant thing became. So it just felt like he was continuing for him. So he used that as an example of if we don't stand up and take back control, this will continue to happen, and I can't let that happen, right? So he's using his past experiences to justify his actions in the present, and so there's that. So you have Dany doing essentially, she's not explicitly saying it, but she's making these decisions based on the things that have happened to her, right, and the way she feels about those things, right?
That she just feels a general sense of betrayal,
right,
of being unwelcoming in King's Landing.
I think Westeros. It's more than that, though, right? I mean, you have specific characters who have died. You have specific characters who she feels just explicitly betrayed her, not just a general sense of betrayal.
Absolutely.
What I'm getting to is she makes that decision. She has to wear the horns for that decision she makes. That being said, in the Magneto example, the Nazis still have to wear the horns for the decisions they made, right? So does Magneto, right? There's blame to go around to both parties, right? Neither are just because you get what I'm saying here.
I understand what you're saying. I think
so. Sansa, in this case of this analogy, is the Nazis, but
which is a pretty loose analogy,
It's
right?
pretty loose. But I'm just saying,
honest,
right? But I'm saying her decision, her actions aren't without blame just because she didn't explicitly do it herself, right? She knew what she was doing,
Yep.
and those actions have consequences. Well, they didn't have consequences for her, but the consequences were she got to sit on the throne.
I think we're talking about two different things here, but yes, certainly those actions don't exist in the vacuum, and they affected Daenerys. And Sansa, she does feel guilty about what happened in King's Landing. It came down to when we were talking the last time, and the reason for the email, it became a thing of it wasn't Dany's fault. She was feeling a certain way because of X, and X, and that's why she did what she did, which I don't think is fair. And I think no matter what, she has to take the blame for what she did.
Right.
Period. Because we all have things happen to us, and we all go through traumas. And if you start using that as an excuse for your actions, where does that lead? That's unethical in its core.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, Sansa certainly not innocent, but I don't think it's not a direct correlation.
All right. Well, we'll agree to disagree on that. Marcos. Would it be more her learning from Cersei, speaking about Sansa, with her, just being more less subtle, like Littlefinger orchestrated things from behind the scenes. Sansa wasn't able to be as subtle as Littlefinger was, but she's also in a different position of power.
Right.
So she definitely learned from both Cersei and Littlefinger, but I think her decisions in the season 8 are more, if you have to compare one or the other, they're more Cersei than they are Littlefinger.
That's fair. Absolutely. It's more about holding on to what you have and pageantry and postury than it is about being subtle.
Okay. Also, Marcos here saying, okay, also in terms of Sansa, was it just me or did she think that she was going to be made queen? And once she wasn't, she decided to separate from the North.
Yeah, she had a weird moment during that council.
Right.
I guess we'll talk. We've already been talking about Sansa, so we might as well include that.
Yeah.
We're not going to go through all 38 characters.
No,
by the way.
no.
Just the mains. So yeah, in that council scene when Tyrion names Bran and they go around the circle.
Who had the best stories? Like it was definitely me. Oh, Bran! God damn it!
When they go around and everyone says I, everyone's agreeing,
Right.
and then Sansa, like she's
like
conflicted
pauses,
and
yeah.
she can't do it. So maybe she did think it would be
Yeah.
her. It's really weird because earlier this season she would have been willing for the North to remain part of the Seven Kingdoms had Jon taken the throne.
Yeah.
As a Stark or Targaryen. I don't know why Bran taking the throne is any different, but whatever.
I think Bran taking the throne has raises some implications about the fate of Jon, for instance. Yes, Jon has been cast out, right? But once the Unsullied leave, couldn't he just pardon Jon?
He can do whatever he wants.
Right? So, because he fucking Bran, he uses the I can do whatever I want, I'm king instantly. It's the first move he uses.
Yeah,
it's not subtle at all, right? So,
I think the idea is Jon is content to go up north and isn't seeking absolution.
I guess, but that doesn't mean he has to strip him of his title and his lands and all those all
he
those
didn't
things.
have really a title or lands. He was king in the north, yeah, but that had already been granted to Sansa. Sorry, that's a pretty important title.
He loses his name and he all those things, right?
Yeah, I think Jon is content to be anonymous, to just be a regular Joe.
He sure didn't look content at the end of the series.
Oh, who knows? Well, maybe there'll be a spinoff.
Also, what do you make of that last look back that he gives?
Okay, well, broad strokes, maybe he's looking back at that's his past, the door's shutting, and now he's just moving on, right? He's in a new space right now, and he's not going to think about what's behind him. That's one way to interpret it. I don't know. That's off the top of my head, though.
Yeah. Right. Jason Telford, I think Sansa's motivations to protect her family and her people are overcompensations from how she was treated by Cersei and Joffrey.
Yeah. That's completely valid.
And Ramsay.
And so you could take that whole argument of, the decisions that Sansa made affecting Daenerys, and you can trace it back to how she was treated by Cersei or Ramsay and how that affected Sansa. And you could go on forever about that, right? There's a spider web there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think everything that Sansa does, while not innocent and it does affect people's lives in an adverse way, it hurts Dany, it hurts Jon.
Mm-hmm.
but everything she's doing to protect the North. I think that part of it's true. It's protecting herself as well. There's selfishness to it,
Oh yeah.
but it's also always been about the North, and she's not willing to budge on that. And I think that does make sense for her character to be in that position, given where we are now.
Mm-hmm. Jumping back and forth here, back to the whole why doesn't Jon just come back and just get pardoned by Bran? Marco says here, I read something that said that they made a point during that scene to show Gendry and Yara are upset. I don't know if Gendry's upset, but Yara sure is, right?
Well, Yara wants blood.
Yeah.
I don't know how to read Gendry, but you ostensibly Gendry would be loyal to Dany. Like that was the idea of her granting him.
Yeah, but like
lordship.
he doesn't give a shit.
He doesn't give a shit.
like give me a break.
Yeah.
If anything, he's loyal to Arya and her family more than anything. Right.
And he and Jon have more of a history.
Yeah.
Albeit brief, but they have a history. I don't know how upset he would be. Maybe he was, but Yara certainly was.
Maybe he was upset. Like, oh shit, she said I was gonna be king of the storm, whatever, Lord of the Stormlands, yeah. And he still ended up being anyway. Like, which I also find it funny was the idea like she got to make this one decision up in the north before she was quote unquote queen of the Seven Kingdoms, and then that decision just sticks after she's dead.
Right.
Oh, convenient.
Okay, so that's Jon. I think we've talked a decent amount about Sansa. Do you have anything else you want to say? You're not a huge fan of Sansa.
No, I think that they made her too. I think they set her up to be much more of a political kind of player and someone who's smarter, but she doesn't act that way in the final season, and she's just much more like blunt. Yeah,
very direct.
So yeah. I think that was a kind of a mishandling. But other than that, I think her final moment with her being crowned Queen of the North, that's kind of a nice full circle thing. The dress she's wearing is really cool. So
let's talk about Sansa's character. So I really love her dress.
Also, no. So I want to bring that up because the costume designer, like the head costume designer on the show, she said. She read this whole interview where she explained everything about how it was made and like the details they put into it, like about the specific like embroideries and all that stuff. But then the crown, which is 2 dire wolves apparently.
Yep.
She's the one who's putting it on her head. Like
that's
the
nice
costume designer is the one that's doing it. I think that was a cool
nice
touch.
touch.
I just kind of want to bring that up.
Yeah. But in terms of her character, I think when she started, she was an innocent little girl and she made some grievous errors early on. And she was punished for that, absolutely. Mm-hmm. It was kind of annoying to watch her be that sort of preteen, whiny, starry-eyed little girl. But she really grew into a forceful character. She went through tons of trials and hardships. We don't need to get into all of it.
Right.
I think at the end of the day, I love Sansa's full circle arc. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the dress. It is kind of weird. Like, what else does her character do though? She's not Arya.
She doesn't get to pick up a sword. Yeah.
That final montage is Jon and Arya putting their swords into their scabbards, and Sansa putting her sleeves on her dress. Right.
Right.
But it's more than that. She's a leader in the North, and they all stand behind her.
Right.
As a direct result of her actions.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that makes her arc is one of the more gratifying ones. I think.
Then we have Arya, who goes off to see what's west of Westeros. That video that you says couldn't Bran just tell her what's west of Westeros? I guess not.
Yeah. That's another example of that whole Bran thing. He's all powerful and knows everything apparently because now he knows the future. Which we'll get to that. I have things to say about Bran, but in terms of Arya, she wants to explore. She doesn't want to be told. She wants to find out herself. That's fine.
Okay, and she's like you said, the wandering wolf, all that kind of stuff so it fits for her. Again, I found that her and Jon's final scene together was the most effective of them all. Their bond was, they only came back together for the first time in the entire series this season, but it felt like they had never been separated. It was really, although except for when Jon kept not understanding how she had changed, which happened a couple times. But I mean, whatever. It takes some time. You have to be told something 7 times before it really sticks or something like that. But whatever. I liked it. I liked Arya's.
I like most of her stuff. Again, we've been over this. I don't like that she's the one to kill the Night King because it's so out of left field. But I understand the direction that they chose to take the character. Yeah. In terms of her whole arc, it gets real dark for a long time. I wish we had seen a bit more face changing.
Yeah, that
But-
doesn't seem to pay off as much. It doesn't pay off at all in the final season.
Like it became more about her just being a good fighter than it was about being a faceless man, right? Much like Bran, it became more about him just telling people stuff that he knows instead of we didn't get to see a lot of his green dreams or his
None.
going into the past, So it's like we established these really cool directions to take the characters. We used it once and then it's done.
Yeah.
I guess Arya used it a couple times, right?
I mean, like, yeah, Arya does use it every once in a while, but I guess you could say that, like, yeah, her being a faceless man, you could say that her not doing that is kind of her, rejecting that kind of, even though she does use it. I don't know. I'm trying to, it's a stretch here, but this idea that she's rejecting what that whole thing was.
But that would have to come after that conversation with the Hound, where he convinces her not to pursue revenge, right?
Right.
So that's the end of her arc, and then she starts something new with the exploration thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that overall, Arya got a good ending, I think.
Yeah, and again, I think when it comes to the Night King situation, it's one of those things where you either, if you don't like it, I understand why, but I can also understand why they did it. The same thing. It works either way for me.
Yeah, I don't know. I was convinced she was going to die, so I mean, I didn't want her to die. I'm happy that she didn't, but I was convinced that the Starks were going to take some heavier losses.
Yeah, well, it turns out the story was just about the Starks. So,
yeah,
like the final montage is just the 3 Starks. Like they don't, like no one else is shown.
And Bran's still there, but he's not part of that montage.
Right. He's the king, so we don't like. He just rolls around on his chair.
And he's also next on our list. So
Bran.
The difficulty I have with Bran's character is, at least the past 2 seasons, if not longer, he hasn't done a thing. I'm pretty sure in this season, he doesn't have a line in episode 3, 5, and maybe 4. And his only line in episode 6 is that line about that's what I came here for, essentially, right? So he was so much of a minor character for the longest time that it just comes out of nowhere for him to be crowned king.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't really explain or explore his powers to a satisfactory level for me. I would like to have seen more of him going into the past and giving us more context about some of this stuff.
On the bright side, Bran can now start a school for gifted youngsters.
Right. As king, he could. And the biggest thing, okay, if we're going to go back to the ethics of everything, of every character's actions, right? And specifically the genocide, right?
Right.
If we're given to believe that Bran can see the future now, that he knew everything up to that moment was leading him to becoming king, that means that he knew what Dany would do and he let it happen anyways.
Right. This is, you can argue, is this similar as like the Doctor Strange moment in...
Okay, and I knew you would bring this up, and I'm prepared for this.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought this up.
I have a chart.
Yeah, so we often compare Bran to Dr. Manhattan from The Watchmen, if you're not familiar, who is also an omnipotent character.
I said Doctor Strange, but continue.
Okay, you said Doctor Strange. I was thinking Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah,
I was so ready for my argument that I ignored your... Okay, you say your thing first. I'll go after.
I was just saying that in Infinity War...
Which, okay, let's be clear here. There will be spoilers
for
both
Infinity War and
Endgame.
Endgame. Yeah.
It's been a couple.
It's been weeks. It's been weeks. There's the Spider-Man trailers come out, which spoils the same. It's fine.
But there's a chance that people haven't seen it. Also, just put that out there.
Yeah, exactly. So if you don't want that, just skip ahead a couple of bit. You'll be fine.
And if you're listening live, plug your ears. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. So he sees all the possible future outcomes.
It's almost like it's too early to do this. I feel like
it's absolutely not.
I'm genuinely
again, but we gave a spoiler warning and people can skip ahead.
All right.
He sees all the possible outcomes, and then one of them, the only one that quote unquote they win in, is there is a genocide. The people who survive have to go through that emotional trauma and pain, and he lets that happen for the quote unquote greater good, right? So you could make the same argument here for Bran, who said he saw all the possible outcomes and saw this one as the one that, even though, and then he makes the same kind of judgment call that Arya makes, basically saying that like whatever actions that I'm taking now or inactions that I am to prevent this thing from happening is worth it because Jon eventually kills Dany, and that kind of smooths everything out over at the end.
Yeah. So I get what you're saying. In my mind, it's a little bit different because in the Marvel Universe, we're talking about branching realities and multiple futures. That doesn't seem to be the case in Game of Thrones.
It's hard to say. We don't know how he sees the future.
Yeah, because
right?
they didn't really explore it. But it's not the idea of multiple branching realities means there were other possibilities,
right.
right? So maybe there's only one possibility, and Bran knew exactly what was meant to happen, and that is what's happening. Which at the end of the day sounds really boring.
Yeah, well,
right?
it means that there's destiny and like no one has free will. And it's like
Yeah.
So no, I mean, every time we've seen people predict, quote unquote, predict the future in this show, it's usually not turned out very well.
Right.
But it's there's these interpretations. So I'm guessing that he spent a lot of time sitting and going and doing these, I don't know, I guess having these visions and like interpreting them into the version of the history that he saw.
Okay, so the analogy that I was prepared to use,
Right.
This is
I just ignored what I had to say.
because you said doctor, and then I was like, okay, got it.
Okay.
This is Dr. Manhattan again.
So
We've
spoilers for Watchmen.
Watchmen spoilers are out there.
19 from what 1980? What
Yeah, I think 84 came out or something
Yeah.
like that. Maybe later than that, 86. Dr. Manhattan is very similar to Bran in the sense that he's basically omnipotent. He's actually more powerful than Bran, but in terms of his he can see the future simultaneously, right? So
Right.
he has a different perspective on time. And then what happens towards the end of Watchmen, again, spoilers, it's one of the greatest graphic novels you'll ever read, so I highly recommend it. But towards the end, there is this genocide. There's this crazy genocide that happens, and he wasn't able to predict it. Now the difference is tachyons.
Okay. Daniel, God damn it. No, I'm going to stop this argument right now. We're not bringing in tachyons into a Game of Thrones
Just
show.
hang on. The difference is Ozymandias used tachyons to cloud Dr. Manhattan's vision of the future. So he wasn't able to see what happened, and he was surprised.
Right.
So it's not quite the same. And then in the end, where he understands why, because the results are the same. It was sacrifice many to save many more. Sacrifice millions to save billions, right? And that's essentially what Danny is doing here, although with much less foresight. At the end, the point that Dr. Manhattan gets to is that he understands without condoning or condemning. He simply understands. So maybe that's where Bran's at. But if he had prior knowledge, it seems kind of gross to let him allow Danny to not say anything and watch Danny murder millions or thousands.
And if he's not a robot, which I'm not convinced he's not a robot, that he lets like all these people close to him go through these traumas that he potentially could avoid. Like if again, we're taking the show at face value, if Jon truly loves Danny, right?
Yeah.
He allows this whole thing to play out so that Jon has to kill the person that he loves. Like that's a terrible thing to let happen.
And there's that one scene with them in the Godswood where he at least says it's your choice to Jon whether or not to reveal the information.
Right.
So that either that was what he was meant to say and that was what was bound to happen, blah blah blah, or he's allowing for the possibility of independent choice, right?
Right, and so it's like you can say whatever you want. I think this is what you're gonna, and you said what I thought you were gonna say.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, it's really hard because they didn't really explore too well. It just muddies the waters a little bit. That's what I thought about Bran.
Right. Jason Telford saying Bran would ultimately make the perfect king because he would look back and observe the failures and successes of past kings, which I think what the show is trying to say about this idea that he can, he knows everything and can learn from those mistakes, but
and everything at present, right? So he would know if there's any rebellions being planned. He would he theoretically could know about it. I guess he has to know where to look. It's not really clear. But he definitely would make a good king in terms of that.
Although
ability.
They sure don't show him being a very good king. Like they have an opportunity to show him being engaged as part of the small council and all that kind of stuff. But instead, they wheel him in so he can be wheeled right back out because he's going to go find Drogon. Because why? Like, I don't know.
And again, with this omniscience, like, what would he even need to find Drogon? Wouldn't he just know? It's so unclear.
Well, again, I think we made the whole argument, this is several episodes ago, but that just because he's Google, right? He has access to Google, which means you still have to go search out the information you need. It's not just provided to you instantly and you know everything, right? It's not the Matrix where you plug in and you just know how to fly a helicopter, right?
This show is full of weird references that have nothing to do with Game of Thrones.
Yeah, but they're also genre references. So it's like It's not that there's not that much of a
Yeah,
leap.
Marvel, X-Men,
Watchmen.
Watchmen.
You said the word
Matrix.
tachyons. Okay. And I think we just need to one last thing, and we said this last week, but we just need to say that this like new method of governing is is just as capable for to be manipulated and
it's almost exactly the same.
if not, it's actually possibly worse because you give more control to more people.
Yeah, and you have the North. The North has set this precedent that
Right.
we're opting out, and that's a possibility.
It's like, whoa, wait.
And then what if 2 weeks from now, Dorne's like, yeah, we're out.
Yeah, it's like crap. I get like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna start a war to keep them in? Like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
like
I don't know. There's that. And then the only thing that's different is the idea that there is a form of an election whenever there's a need for a new king. Now, Bran being Three-Eyed Raven could live for 1,000,000 years. Who knows?
right, but also like okay, so there's need for a new king. There's gonna be a quote unquote election from like a electoral college essentially.
Yeah.
How easily is it to manipulate that? Like okay, power grabbing becomes so much more like less subtle, or you can just go okay. Me and the Stormlands and Dorne are going to team up to prevent X person get on the throne.
And then they're going to buy the Riverlands vote, right?
Right, exactly.
Or maybe they're going to coerce that person. Yeah,
right.
It's very similar to some political systems that we have in place now.
Yeah, and obviously I'm not saying that the like strict like monarchy that they had with like succession and all that was better. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the way that they presented it as this. It's like, wow, what a great idea we've had. We're going to solve all this problems of all this corruption and death by implementing this change. It's just going to be it's going to be the same. It's a net zero gain.
Yeah. At least it's different. It'll last for a couple of years and then who knows?
At least it's different. Change for the sake of change.
Yeah. All right. So that's the Starks, I think.
Okay.
Got them all done, more or less. Some more than others. Obviously, more to say about Jon than Bran, but whatever. That's the way it is.
Here's a question. Marcos is asking, would Sansa help if someone took war to Bran? And if so, would it be to help family or because she worries the next king will be different or, whatever, make no North rejoin the Seven Kingdoms?
It's an interesting question. Well, I think she probably would help Bran just for the sake of maintaining the status quo because she's pretty happy with the way things turned out and because he's a brother. Like, but it really would depend on the circumstances. It would depend on who's rebelling and why. But I think, like, yes, they're two independent nations at this point. The North has succeeded, but I imagine that they would be close allies as long as Bran is the king.
Yeah,
Sansa would be
exactly as long as
and then whenever Bran steps down or is poisoned and killed, like who knows, right? Maybe he'd be able to prevent it. But whatever.
I mean, there's a lot of like possible outcomes, right? So okay, maybe Bran isn't king for, but like even let's say this new piece lasts a full generation. So you have Bran lives till he's 100 and dies, right? Sansa lives till she's 80 and dies, whatever it is. I don't know what the normal life expectancy
probably less
is in
than
Westeros,
but whatever. The idea would be that she would have kids, and
right? But who with who?
Whoever she wants.
Well, I don't know with anyone. I know that, Daniel. I just thought like they didn't really set up like any romantic connections for her. So,
but there's plenty of opportunity. Like whatever. The
could be any northern house.
It's going to be a long piece. It may be a northern house, or maybe not a northern house. Maybe they maintain a closer relationship,
like a soft relationship between the Six Kingdoms and the North, right?
But then she would also have kids that would take her place on the throne,
right, and
eventually.
make different decisions. And like exactly what all I'm saying is that this new solution is only a temporary one.
Well, I mean, what's the solution? Nobody knows.
Sam said it. But I mean, that has its own problems too.
Okay.
There's no perfect solution. Okay, let's move on.
Next on our list is the three Lannisters, and then Daenerys. I don't think we'll go further than that. Starks, Lannister, Targaryen, those are the main characters.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we've and I think we've kind of set our piece on Jorah and Varys and Missandei and
in other episodes, yeah.
Theon, maybe. I do really like just quickly before we get into more. Sure. I really liked Theon's arc. I think it's probably one of the most satisfying on the entire show.
Aside from his death, seemed a bit of a waste, but I understand why he was there.
Yeah.
But in terms of the arc, both him and Jamie to me are the most interesting character arcs.
Except for Jamie's last second
Again,
decision.
both of them,
Right.
yeah, fair enough.
Right.
But in terms of the way that their characters first
changed,
yes, they were brought down and then they grew and they got over they overcame their demons.
Mhm.
All that kind of relapsed as well. Theon was scared of Euron and jumped ship and sacrificed Yara. You know, he had moments of cowardice, but he was overcoming all that the entire time. So overall, throughout all 8 seasons with Theon, very interesting character,
Yeah.
very satisfying arc.
And again, season 2, best season to rewatch.
Turns out.
Yeah. All right, so let's go jump back here to Cersei. Did you find her arc for the series to be a satisfying one? Different though, because we're talking about a villain, right?
We are. Overall, yes. Overall, I think that makes a lot of sense. Again, this last season, she didn't do much. She didn't have much to do.
No, she's like held up in the castle.
She didn't have very
yeah.
many lines. She like didn't even take any sort of real actions other than what she did with Missandei, right?
Right.
That was probably the most work that she had to do this season. So we didn't get a lot out of her this season. Overall, in terms of her arc, yeah, she's one of the story's main villains. One of the characters that I personally dislike and despise.
Right.
Throughout the entire time. So it all kind of makes sense and it all kind of falls into line with what I had imagined about the character, except for the very end.
Right, where you're really hoping for lots of trials this season, and you don't really get any trials.
I didn't get not a single trial. You could argue that
Jamie
with the council and Tyrion, that's a trial, and maybe Jamie at Winterfell, there's like an off-screen trial. But yeah, it's not what I was expecting, or not what I.
Yeah, you were
predicted.
just like, you're like, there's gonna be a trial next week's gonna be a trial. It's gonna be great.
Like, okay, just looking back over the entire series, those trials are some of the most
they're very good.
invigorating
Oh, I know,
episodes.
they're very good. I'm not saying that I didn't want them. I'm just saying that you were hoping for them and they never came.
Yeah. So Cersei, I mean, at the last minute, she kind of just turns into a quivering, scared little girl, and like that. Maybe that is in character because a lot of her motivation comes from her childhood.
Yeah.
It's just not what I imagined.
You could also imagine that like all of her bravado and all that she does is all just an act, and that underneath that she is just afraid.
Yeah, and that's true. That's a good point. And Jamie's the only person that she would ever open up to, that she's ever been completely transparent with. So in that last moment, there's nobody else around. It's just the two of them, and she doesn't want to die. I think that does make sense.
Yep.
I was just picturing more repercussions for her actions.
Yeah, and so I'm kind of like thinking about this now. People are like, "Oh, Dany should have been able to been the one to kind of to sentence her to death or whatever." But like, I actually don't think that Dany earns that move.
Not after what she did.
Not after, but even if she'd done it well, I don't think she earns that. That like. She comes in, she's like, again, like you said, like last second, like white savior kind of thing. And then like, but like,
it would be more like, I think it would be immensely satisfying, maybe fan servicey, but to have Sansa sitting in judgment of Cersei.
Right. That would be more satisfying.
That would be like, yeah, get it, girl. Like,
Yeah.
But obviously that's not the case. There wasn't a way for them to, there probably was a way for them to write it in, but they went a different route.
No, they know their hands were tied. They had to do they had 75 hours. That's
what are you
it.
going to do? What are you going to do?
That's it. So yeah, I mean it is, and then people pointing out like when we find out in the final episode that they just stood like a couple feet to the left, right? they'd been just fine.
It's not clear. The way episode 5 ended, they seemed to be buried, like an entire castle fell on them, and it turns out it was just a concentrated group of bricks. But whatever.
Right. Okay. Cersei. Anything other final thoughts on Cersei?
That's about it. Like, again, series is probably one of the main villains. Her and the Night King are the main villains of the entire series. In terms of,
and Cersei's the more interesting villain.
100%. Yes,
the Night King literally never speaks. So, and it's just the personification of death. So it's like, as cool as that is as an idea, it's hard to like be engaged with that. So I even understood why they ended that in the 3rd episode this season. I understood wrapping up that
right,
that whole
because the series has always
storyline.
been about, and this is a George R. R. Martin quote, conflict within the human heart being the only thing that's worth writing about, right?
Right.
So that Night King stuff, like that is the more fantasy element. It's important and it's a huge part of the series. But at the end of the day, what Cersei embodies is corruption, is the ends justify the means, all that kind of stuff we always talk about. But she represents someone who is governed by her own impulses and not the greater good. Is selfish. Is everything that's wrong with society and politics. That so that's what she really embodies as a character. That's why it's a more interesting villain.
Yeah. Um.
And because you understand her motivations.
What do you say to the people who are like, well, they don't feel like that Night King storyline wrapped up in a satisfying fashion, like that they were looking for more. Do you think they were looking for something that was never there with that kind of feeling that they didn't wrap up in a satisfying manner?
Well, I think first of all, I would agree with them in general. But that's again just a symptom of it being so short, right? Because that realistically should have been a whole season leading up to, like, that should have been season 8 should have been just leading up to, and then episode 9 would have been the battle for Winterfell,
Right.
and then the next season would have been all this other political stuff, right? And that could have even been a 6-episode season. Imagine just even 6 episodes of Daenerys's fall from grace,
right,
and dealing with all
yeah,
this stuff.
no, I get it, but it's better than 2 episodes.
Yeah. So I get it. I imagine it would have played out very similarly either way. I expected that there would be heavier losses on the good guys' side. We lost a couple. Like Jorah is the biggest one, right? And Theon. Other than that, not much. So at the end of the day, it feels rushed because it's the prologue. The first scene of the series is the White Walkers, and it's been teased, and we've been following this leash for 8 seasons, and then it ends.
It feels kind of empty.
It's just like boom, done. I don't know what I was imagining.
That's my thing. I struggle to understand what people were hoping for. Were they just hoping more people would die? Because if that's what it was, like, I really feel like you would have been happier with that. Like, I don't think so. Right?
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's one of those things. It's really hard to define and describe because I still feel that emptiness like you described, but I don't know what I would have changed or what I thought would have happened.
Maybe that's the point. Maybe that, death has no meaning,
Sure.
I feel like that's an easy thing to say, but sure. All right. Let's see who else we got here. We have Jaime Lannister next, and arguably one of the most popular, one of the best written characters, best performed characters, one of the deepest characters, but I think his arc was just. I like everything except for the final moments, which I think is a fair, like,
it seems to be a
trend. But like the line where he doesn't care about the normal people doesn't add up. Like, just strike that from the record, like it doesn't exist.
Yeah,
it becomes much better then. And then also this, like, becoming a better person, knighting Brienne, then like dating Brienne for like a weekend, and then leaving. Like, it's too fast. Like, the idea of him having this understanding that he has to be there when she's like sentenced to death, essentially, which I think is what he kind of expects. But then he ends up going to save her. So it's a different type of kind of, like, what do you make of that? Is the basically what they're saying here is you can try to change as much as you want, but at the end of the day, you'll always fall off the wagon. Which is kind of shitty thing to say.
And I love that part of his arc. So they're not saying that for everybody, but they're saying that's what happens for Jaime. Right? He does fall off the wagon. He relapses at the last possible minute, even though he has made so much progress. And I think for a lot of people, again, these are broad strokes, nobody in specific, whatever. But I think that happens for a lot of people. You what people say about addiction is that you never actually get over it. You just learn to live with it, right? That's an analogy that we're making, that he's addicted to Cersei, because that is something that's clearly toxic in his life that he keeps going back to. So I like his arc going back and forth, and I think it makes sense even for him to relapse at the last minute when it becomes all too real. I just think what happened between him and Brienne was supposed to be this triumphant moment of him overcoming things, and it probably would have been, and it probably could have lasted a couple episodes, and then had him make this change. My biggest issue is I don't understand what impetus guided him to go back to King's Landing. Yes, Sansa telling him that Cersei's going to die, but he knew that already.
Yeah, but I think
that made it more real, I think. So then he was like, okay, now I have to make the decision. I guess he was putting it off or hoping for some other solution or some other resolution, I should say. Who knows? Uh, it's not. I like the idea of him relapsing. I think I've said this before. I'm repeating myself at this point, but I don't like the way it was handled.
Right. I I still prefer the idea that he had come to that they could have done this in a way where they they didn't have to have Jamie die in the attempt to save Cersei, right? That that they could have been together at and try to subvert that Valonqar prophecy, right? In a different way. And that this way feels too much like a relapse. And that there could have been a middle ground there where he's able to kind of understand what
Yeah, I like
mistakes
that.
he's making.
Here's
You know what
here's
I
a
mean?
pitch. I just came off the top of my head here. What if he does go back? All that kind of stuff happens, and then like he convinces Cersei to stay and die with him. He's like,
Right.
"This is over." Blah, blah. I don't know how to write it, but like, you know what I mean. Instead of them trying to escape and dying in the tunnels
Well,
like
and
rats,
and not being able to, and like, it's not that they stopped trying to escape, it's that they were prevented from being able to escape,
right.
which is very different.
So like, it could have been them accepting their fate and the way things are, and it could have been a beautiful moment because he's always said, "We came into the world, we're together, we'll go out together."
Right.
That's he's always known that, right? So again, the fact that they went out together is not surprising. What's wrong with you?
This beer's warm.
Yeah, I forgot to put it. It's not. It's cool. It's like
God damn it. That's all right. Anywho, yes, I like that. Again, just think back to that scene with Jamie and Brienne in the hot tub. In that season,
one of the best scenes of the entire series.
what is that? Season
That's
5?
season 3.
Season 3? That's season 3?
Yeah.
Huh.
It's right after he loses his hand.
Right.
And he's kind of delirious. That's why he's so open with her.
Right.
Is he's on milk of the poppy. He's bathing. He passes out in that tub. But there's some beautiful YouTube compilations of this kind of stuff about like Jamie, a man without honor, like
Mhm.
stuff like that. I don't know the names of the creators off the top of my head, and I'm sorry, but look it up. You can find a million tribute videos. I think they're called
Right.
for all the characters. But the Jamies are the best in my mind. But in that scene, yeah, he's going over what happened with Eris and why he did what he did, why everybody looks at him a certain way for the most, in his mind, honorable thing he's ever done, saving millions of
Yeah.
lives by
Yep.
killing Eris.
Which is why that line of him not caring about the little people makes no sense. And it
Absolutely.
could have been him just posturing, but why is he posturing to Tyrion? It makes no sense. So
Again, it could be
just a
one of those
mistake.
things because Tyrion's one of the only people that he would be completely honest with, and like, so part of the motivation for him killing Eris was Cersei.
right.
So it's complicated. I feel like we're already going long, so I don't necessarily have to go into it now. But him being named to the Kingsguard, he thought he would be closer to Cersei because she was at court at the time, and then she was sent back, and it was a whole thing. So that's not necessarily why he killed Eris, but he was there, and his motivations even at that time were Cersei. Long story short.
Okay. Let's move on. We have now Tyrion, who is the definition of failing upward, I guess. And
It's in the later seasons, yeah.
yeah. He gets to be hand of the king, which he says he doesn't want. But I mean, really, he says it all the time. It's what he's best at.
That's what he's built for.
Right. Like what would he be doing otherwise?
It's one of those things. Like after everything these characters have been through, John's the same way. Like they just want to break. They just want to relax, in a cottage, smoke a pipe, and like
Yeah, fair enough.
put their feet up, And I'm sure after everything Tyrion's been through, he just wants to like chill out for a bit.
He doesn't get to.
But he is the single best suited person to
Right.
be head.
It's one of those like, is it like one of those like careful what you wish for because you might just get it kind of deals?
Sure.
Like you want to be hand, now you get to.
Now you really are
have-
going to be.
Yeah,
hand.
exactly. I'm okay with that. I'm actually kind of okay with that. I know people feel like it's not like it doesn't seem fair. Like he doesn't have to face any consequences for any of his mistakes. But again, I think the show sets it up in a way that, like you said, like he wants to wash his hands of this and kind of be done with it. And in one way, he has to kind of pay for his mistakes by fixing them himself, and then
Yeah, that's
and
what
kind
they
of
say.
and like I think that makes sense. I don't think that's cheap. To me, that makes sense. I don't know.
It certainly makes sense for his character in terms of his arc. He's arguably the smartest character on the show. Again, arguably one of the most important political figures of the time. There's no reason for him to not be in that book. It's
Yeah, that's really
ridiculous.
stupid. I think that was just I think that final like small council scene has like a couple weird things that they do. Like that line is clearly just there to like as a like a way to reference how he has like a bit of it, still has a bit of an ego and all that kind of stuff, right? So okay, but no, it makes no sense. He should be in the book. There'd be no reason he wouldn't be.
He was hand to 2 kings and a queen.
yeah. So they're just gonna say the hand. They're not gonna reference who. It's dumb. So there's that. There's also the Bronn problem, which is this idea that apparently Tyrion felt, I guess he felt that to save his own life, he probably should follow through on the promise that he made, which I guess is fair, but he didn't have to make him the master of coin. This man is a crook. He's not a good person.
Yeah.
Right? What qualifications does he have to be to be a master of coin?
Well, I mean, you could probably say the same thing about Littlefinger. He was not a good person. He was master of coin for a while.
Right, but that's in a much more corrupt version of this small council.
And but he was also good at his job. He was good
Right.
at turning what they would say is like he would rub his finger rub one dragon between his fingers and make 2, something along
Right.
those lines. So he's good at finding money, lending out where needed, and collecting interest where needed, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So he was good at that. I don't know that Bronn would be. He would be good at enforcing it.
Right.
So,
I mean, and like it's not like he could be in charge of the Kingsguard again. We saw that, or City Guard again. We saw how that worked out, where he just went around and killed all the thieves.
I think with Bronn, they ran out of time and didn't have enough to spend on that character. So there's like, give him this position. This is his ending. I don't imagine he'll survive the books.
Yeah, I don't know why they felt like he needed to be there. Like
It's because they had made promises earlier in the season.
Right. I mean, again, you can pay that off, but again, try to be like try to stay true to the story you're trying to tell, and putting him as having that should just be another mistake that Tyrion would make.
Okay.
Right?
So as much as we were talking about Tyrion, I guess we're on Bronn right now. What's a better way to end that character, though, right? So you can't, after everything that's done, after Dany's death, and we're in a period of denouement at this point, you can't have him turn up, try to kill Tyrion, and fail and be killed.
No,
arrested or anything like that. Like, how do you end his character?
So you could just have another scene where Tyrion is naming him, or like on behalf of the king, naming him Lord of the Highgarden, right? And that's similar. That line that they say in the thing is like, do you feel like the crown's debt is paid, right? And then and he rides off, and then we never see him again.
I guess. I mean, I'm thinking on paper that doesn't sound great, but it sounds as satisfying.
Exactly. It's at least as satisfying, and it doesn't ruin the illusion of an actually just small council. Like Davos being the master of ships, perfect sense, right? Makes perfect sense. Brienne being the head of the Kingsguard,
the Lord Commander.
Yep, makes perfect sense.
Love that, by the way.
Right?
We don't have enough time to really dive into Brienne's character, but that is one of the more satisfying character arcs, I think, in the end of the grand scheme of things.
Marco said, I thought you said the LeBron problem, and it was very interesting to see how this comparison is going to go down.
Yeah. So you're with one team for so long, right? Bronn's with Tyrion for forever. I don't know. I don't watch a lot of basketball, so I can't carry it further.
Raps though in the final,
I guess.
Yeah. I don't really care about basketball either, but I mean, hey, the one Canadian team. So, yeah, I don't know. That's how I would have done it. But that's what this episode's for. The last one was for taking it how it was. This time we can be more creative. Okay.
Back to Tyrion.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Probably, again, one of the top 3 main characters of the show.
Yep.
One of my personal favorite characters. He gets some of the best lines in the books as well as the show.
Yep.
He drinks and he knows things, right? That's his character.
That's on shirts.
Yeah, it's perfect, right?
Yep.
I obviously thought we would have more of a trial. I thought, as much as they keep saying that he made a lot of mistakes, and he has, he was kind of set up.
Yeah.
He wasn't given a lot of options. Like, it's not like he makes a lot of stupid mistakes. I don't think.
I think what they try to show us is this person who is attempting to do something that's inherently like not a good thing, right? To kind of orchestrate a rebellion to overthrow your sister, right, is a difficult thing to do. And there's going to be difficult decisions you have to make. And what he does is, instead of making those difficult decisions, he attempts to
find a middle ground.
Find a middle ground, and there is no middle ground, right? And then every time he does that, like so you try to find a middle ground, and that other team basically takes that other middle ground that you gave up and just claws it right back. And every time he did that, the exact same thing happened. Right. And this idea that he kept having faith in Cersei to change, like which I still can't wrap my head around why he would think that. And I think everyone likes Tyrion. I think the show does a giant disservice to the character by making him look like a fucking idiot.
Sometimes,
and like,
yeah.
And in the last couple seasons, and I think they could have shown him struggling with decisions and then having made errors, which is they do show us sometimes, but instead it's like he just looked at me, oh, you failed me, you failed me yet again, Starscream. Like it's like, you know, like a lackey.
Pretty much. I think he could have been written better. It should have been him, you know, playing both sides and trying to like, you know, outthink both sides to find a better solution. But it really played out as him just being like, well, Cersei has kids, or she has a kid and she likes kids, or her kids.
Right.
So she's going to do this thing. And it's a little one note, and that's not within his character. That being said, overall, I like where his character came from and where he arrived to.
It's like they forgot that he'd already learned that lesson.
Yeah.
And then and then they just did it again. I don't know. That bugs me a lot.
Fair enough. That's a valid argument. Yeah. Again, one of the main characters, one of the better actors on the show.
Mm-hmm.
You know, magnificent performances.
You say that, although I think he's only good as Tyrion. Like Peter Dinklage.
We're only talking about the show.
I know. I'm just saying, but like every time I've seen Peter Dinklage in other things, it's like he's not good in Avengers Infinity War. He's not good in X-Men Apocalypse.
No, that was Days of Future Past.
Days of Future Past. He's like, he was literally cut out of that video game, Destiny, because he was so bad.
But that I would not blame the actor for that. Okay. That was that game. Some horrendous
right, but
writing.
you can but they replaced him with Nathan Fillion, and he was able to kind of.
Well, Nathan Fillion was already part of the game. Whatever.
I don't know who they replaced him with. It doesn't matter. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We're talking about the show. He was good on the show. So,
and in this last episode, when he found Jaime and Cersei, you know, you say what you will. At the end of the day, he did care about his family, and
to his detriment.
Even Cersei, to a degree, who was horrible to him.
Yep,
her entire life and his entire life. But
so the lesson is never try.
So Tyrion, like, family was immensely important to him,
right?
And so even at the end of the day, he was trying to do the right thing, but he also trying to preserve his family. I think that's a very interesting position to put a character like Tyrion in.
Mm-hmm.
That is the definition of internal conflict. So I again, that's going to be phenomenal in the books with the depth of the books and the characters. So I can't wait for that. I saw a lot of this. We said this in our last podcast. A lot of what we're doing is filling in the blanks with our perceptions of these characters. If you look at it on paper, the way it's written, Tyrion this season, very superficial.
Yeah.
But we're filling in the blanks. So,
all right. I think that's you can have a large discussion about people who are like who are really invested in the show and who are able to see past like the mistakes and able to fill in those kind of gaps on their own. I think makes the show more, like the last season, a little bit more like palatable. I think if you're much more of a superficial fan, you know, and saying there is scale, like a degrees of fandom, and which is what I'm saying. So if you're, and superficial is maybe not the right word. It's not fair.
Casual
fan. Even that doesn't sound nice.
Stupid. Just kidding.
A less invested fan of the show. I think, and you're unlikely to be listening to this because if you're a super fan, you're more likely to find podcasts about it. I would say, but that if you're not as invested, I think you would have a harder time, kind of filling in those blanks and making it kind of more palatable. But so it comes off a lot worse, you know.
You say that, but like when I talk to people at work, a lot of people are like largely like just like saying these things. This is what happened, and it's cool, and you know that's just part of their day. Whatever. We don't need to get into that conversation.
It's the opposite. That people at my work are like they're much more like upset about how things played out.
Whatever. Okay. That's enough for Tyrion. The next one on our list is Daenerys. We could like quickly touch on any of the other sort of more minor characters because I think Daenerys is going to be a larger conversation.
All right. So let's see what we got here. We got obviously we did Missandei.
We did Grey Worm and Missandei. We did Theon. The next one that I would touch on would be Sam. I think.
I guess we could talk about Sam. Sam gets he has literally the most like fairy tale book ending in this. Like, not only does he inexplicably survive the
Yeah, don't get me started on that. There's multiple times within that battle where he's overwhelmed and then it just cuts away and then he's fine.
right. So that it doesn't make any sense. So whatever. Neither here nor there. It is there, but it's not here. It's he gets to not only be a maester, but also have a wife and kids.
Yeah.
So,
and good for him.
good for him.
I love Sam.
Right?
Yeah. That's about it for his character.
And I'm moving on.
He gets a happy ending. I don't know. Is there anything in the chat?
Nope, not right now.
Okay.
So,
The next one on the list that I would touch on, Gilly, Gendry, whatever, it's pretty clear. The Hound is an important character, I think. But we knew where his arc was heading the entire time.
and we talked about it, I think, in our last episode. It's just, I found that battle of the gamble to be very satisfying.
Very good.
Yeah.
Sacrifices himself.
They
his brother.
You had brought up, and I'd seen other people bring up this idea that like they weren't excited about it because the mountain had become just like a zombie, and like that's not interesting, right? But they made it interesting in the final moment because they made it clear that he did have.
He recognized him. He remembered him.
Yeah.
So there were stakes again.
Yeah.
It could have been better if that was clear the entire time, but whatever.
I don't know if that really. What does that change? It just changes your expectations.
It builds it up a bit higher.
Yeah.
But whatever. So that's the Hound. Brienne, we've talked about. She gets another great ending. She becomes Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. She writes Jaime's story in the book, which I think is a really nice touch. Jaime's pages were essentially blank before that, and she gives him she writes him honorably and makes him look better than he probably was.
Yeah.
But because everyone else kind of thinks he's worse than he was, it kind of evens out, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough.
The next, Pod, Ed, whatever.
The thing is, though, hey, not everyone gets to read that book,
No,
right?
Only the Kingsguard.
Exactly. So he goes down in history for most people as being a pretty shitty person.
Absolutely.
But I mean, to the people who knew him, I guess is to those who knew him, he was
the thing is,
honorable person.
That would be sort of common knowledge, but in terms of the history, when these things are written down, that's
Right.
what is important at the end of the day. So if anybody were ever to go through the White Book, that's what they would see. This you could imagine. However many other names are written in the White Book. Sir Kristen Cole comes to mind. Was written a certain way.
Also made up names. Just
These people are written by a person, so it's important to remember that they're written in universe with a perspective,
Right.
which is why I love Fire and Blood and the World of Ice and Fire so much, is that they're written by a maester in universe, so it's written from a certain point of view, even though it's written as a history book. It's really
so what
interesting.
you're saying is that it's true from a certain point of view.
Okay.
Speaking of books like that, a book, the Star Wars, a certain point of view, very good. Just
Sure,
recommendation.
sure. I think that's basically Davos is the only other one I think we could touch on quickly.
Davos, who's if you look back, again season 2, his character is, I think they really did like a hard change to the character of Davos. About
How so?
when he lost it, he had kids, he had a son, right? And he never talks about his son.
Yeah, you brought that up.
Right? If you didn't see that one episode where he talked to his son, you would just assume he never had one. So
Yeah.
there's that. And then like he's attached to Stannis for such a long time. And then once he becomes detached from that, I think he becomes this like ultra noble character that I think he's more interesting when he's got those shades of gray. But you know,
he always had sort of pieces of that in his character. To me, and I'm sure to a lot of other people, he kind of replaced Ned Stark as this paragon
Right.
in the books and in the show. After we lost, like Ned Stark was always the honorable character. This is right, this is wrong. I'm going to do this regardless of the consequences because it's the right thing to do. Davos sort of became that character to a lesser degree. He did have shades of gray, like you said, but that's sort of what he represented for a long time. And for Stannis, that is what he represented. Is that
he was the
that
like moral
perspective.
compass.
Exactly. And so that changed once he was no longer with Stannis. It became that maybe for Jon for a bit.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that they never presented Jon as having to need a moral compass.
Yeah.
Right.
But he was just a consultant, an advisor. He was a trusted voice because he has that sort of like salt of the earth
Right. He was more
Honesty.
the speaking for the everyman than Varys ever was.
Yeah.
You know, even though he said he did. Right.
So that's Davos, and then he master of ships makes sense.
Hey, that's a happy ending. Good for him. And he probably gets a nice big house in King's Landing, and
And he'll be fine.
Yeah. Or he probably gets to stay in the keep, likely, right? How's that work? I don't know how that works.
He can probably get a house if he wanted to.
Yeah, it's probably a well-paying position.
There's a salary involved and benefits. He has dental now.
Right? Which is very rare in Westeros.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. There's Ghost. Obviously, Ghost gets a very happy ending. Missing an ear, but he still gets
He
to
goes off with his companion.
Yep.
Nymeria not touched upon.
Not
That
surprising.
wasn't going to be.
Yeah,
She's just a wolf. She has a pack of 100 smaller wolves that follow her
100.
around. Yeah, hundreds.
Hundreds.
Yeah,
That seems
in the
like-
Riverlands, and they just go out and do whatever.
That
they
would be
want.
like an extremely problematic situation for the
It
Riverlands.
is. In the books, this is a huge deal. Like,
Guys, there's a roaming pack of hundreds of wolves
Like,
out there.
in the books, so you have to understand where we are in the books right now. The Riverlands are still it's tumultuous. You know, there are roaming bands of the outlaws. So there's the Brotherhood. There's the Lannister soldiers that are still all
Mhm.
over the place, as well as, you know, to a degree, other soldiers from different various factions. In Book 5, it's mostly resolved, but either way, throughout that whole time, there's a pack of 100 wolves that just show up and destroy people.
That's
And they're led by Nymeria. Well,
It's
they're
like
led by a giant she-wolf, is what they said. They never explicitly name her, obviously,
Right.
because no one
They-
knows her name but Arya.
yeah.
But that's what it is.
Okay.
And Arya has wolf dreams where she goes with Nymeria and attacks people and stuff.
Cool. Robin Aaron. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
He does grow up. It is nice to see that he's kind of maybe matured a little bit. He's like,
Maybe.
you know, and you probably will turn out to be fine. He has
You know,
Brazion
We
Royce
didn't
type-
have Bronzion Royce on this list. That's an omission.
Oh, whose fault is that?
Damn it.
Barrack died. We talked about that already.
That's about it for the.
Yeah. Well,
the
Brienne.
secondary
Did we talk about
we
Brienne?
did.
Yeah.
So back to Daenerys. This is a tough one. Ostensibly, again, one of the main characters and a hero for the longest time. I completely understand what the story they're trying to tell.
Yep.
And I think it will be a very interesting story when it's given the time of day. We've been over this countless times since the episode 5, but it was a heel turn for her character for the most part. There were definitely hints, but she never. I didn't expect that she would have this within her to murder countless innocents like that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I can understand filling in the blanks why this will be a satisfying story. The way that the show shook out, it was not to me.
I think this season is kind of summed up in the whole idea that like I like how it got like where it went or at how it finished. I don't like how it got there.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of her having a, you know, I don't know what you even call it, crisis of conscience, and then making the wrong decision, right? And then having to deal with that as the people around her are kind of reckoning with this like change in perspective, whatever. I like that. There just wasn't enough time. You can't, and I just like fundamentally disagree with the idea that you can introduce that in the second to last episode,
Right.
as a character change,
As like a dun dun dun
right?
moment.
Because here's the thing: foreshadowing is not character development, and you just because they said she could become the Mad Queen, they didn't give us enough to get to lead us to that conclusion,
Right.
Right? If anything, they gave us enough information to say that, oh, she's not going to do that. She's going to overcome that. And just because you surprised us by going the other way, that's not satisfying. Like that's just you just surprised us. Oh, surprise. We lied to you. Like,
And I'm
what?
worried. This is us making inferences at this point, but I'm worried about how much this idea of subverting expectations being what made the show popular initially being a goal for this season.
I think it comes down to the fact that they're not as good, like Benioff and Weiss, who largely wrote every episode of this season.
Yeah.
Except for episode 2, I think. I think Brian Cogman wrote that one. But anyway, that they want to be able to do the same things that George R. R. Martin was doing with this, you know, subverting expectations, but that all felt real and like earned, right?
Yeah.
And every one of those things felt like, it was all there all the whole time. And if we had just been able to see it, right, and not wearing our rose-colored glasses or whatever, we would have been able to predict it. That none of that is true, and they're just not as good a writer.
Well, and that's what it comes. I mean, part of that is the difference in mediums. There's in the books you have so much more room to really create depth of character. That's not an excuse for this show because the show's been able to do it as well. But that's part of it. Like in terms of George R. R. Martin's writing and these crazy surprising moments, like he had a hard time with it. He said that he cried after writing the Red Wedding.
Right.
Like it's a thing that happened and it made sense. It had to happen, but it broke his heart to kill off two of his main characters like that way.
Right.
So I don't think that they invested in Danny the same way that George R. R. Martin would have.
And here's the other thing. I think for you book readers out there, the book is going to end. The same thing is going to happen.
Very similar to a degree.
Probably, right? How it happens is probably going to be a lot better. Maybe. If we ever see those books.
Well, that's the other thing, yeah.
There's the very real possibility that those books never come out and that this is the definitive version of that story.
Why'd you got to say that?
It's just a possibility. I'm not saying I want that to happen. I'm just saying it's possible. And I feel for the creators who went from making their job was adaptation, right? To having to drive the story yourself, which is very different.
Yep. It's a difficult role to be put in for sure. Once you lose the subject material, and Martin's not telling them every single detail that's going to happen. Just the broad strokes.
He could have been more involved, right? Like George R. R. Martin could have been more involved and helped kind of shape those, make sure that those kind of.
But he's also he's a busy dude, and also like you kind of want him to focus on the books, and they are like he was a consultant, but he wasn't really like he wrote episodes earlier on, and he stopped after a point.
I get so there's the argument that concentrate on the books, but the other argument is, hey, this has your name on it. This is your story, and this is how it's going to be viewed by most people, right? You should probably be more invested in how these final seasons go because that's just how people are going to perceive your story. So, like,
I get that. I don't know if he was really given the option.
Of course, he was given the option. He's like an executive producer on the show.
I'm just saying, I don't know how involved he really was allowed to be towards the end.
Unless you're saying like Benioff and Weiss said, like, no, we got it from here.
Well, there was a point where they decided, they made that arbitrary decision that it's going to be 75 hours, that we're going to shorten the seasons. And like they had a roadmap at that point. So at that point, yes, Martin could have consulted and given them advice on characters, but they kind of knew broad strokes where they were going. And so they were making their decisions from there.
I don't like it. At all.
Nobody likes it.
Some
people like it.
I don't know. It's tough. And I understand that, but it just.
Anyways, so we said our piece about Daenerys. Obviously, I could go on for hours about her character. In terms of the arc, I love the idea of her succumbing to, not to the madness necessarily, but to all the pressures of ruling, all the things that she didn't understand. Like she grew up knowing that this was her birthright, or knowing that it was Viserys's birthright, and then it was hers, and this is what was owed to her.
Mm-hmm.
And she had this sort of fantasy idea of all the people rallying around their true queen, and then that wasn't the case. When she got there, the reality of the situation really changed her mind,
right.
And that series of betrayals, that series of all these roadblocks got to her, and that's a super interesting story for a character that we
only we got to see it. So I like the idea that they showed us that she struggled with ruling, like the actual day-to-day operation of ruling was very hard for her, and she wasn't very good at it.
Even in Marine,
yeah,
she was
that's
ruling.
what I know exactly, and they showed that to us in the show, and I think that's full points there. But they just didn't spend the time here on the other stuff, and so the pieces are there. They just didn't quite put them together properly. Okay. That's Daenerys. Anything else we want to say about specific characters?
I think that's we got all the main characters. We don't need to talk about every single one. We have, as much as we keep saying we're not trying to beat a dead horse, I think we have been in terms of it being rushed. So that much is very clear at this point. Anything else from the chat room? Anybody else?
Yeah. So Marcos says, how would you guys rank the seasons looking back on the show? And does seeing how good season 2 was for a rewatch change your opinion of it? So it does actually.
Oh, Oh, I'd love to hear you say that.
But
you were not excited about season 2.
I wasn't, but that doesn't mean that is a great. It doesn't mean it was great. It just has some great moments.
It is a season because it was so early that really benefits from a rewatch once you have more context.
Right.
Because initially there's a million characters. Who knows what's going on?
We talked about this when I rewatched. I was like, I looked back on that season 2 while having watched it watching it for the first time, and just being super confused about what the hell was going on, who the people they were talking about, who they were talking to. Like it was a lot. It was a lot to throw at people. So, but it is higher on my on my list now.
Yeah, if I were to rank them, 3 is number 1. 3 is the best season.
A lot of people take 1 as
It's between the two of them. It's 1 and 3, but 3 by a hair.
I think 3 is also my favorite season. I think 1 after that.
Yeah, and then 4.
Yeah, 4 is really good. 5 probably.
No, 5. I hated 5.
You didn't like 5?
5 was one with all the surprise stabbings and.
Okay, well, what about and 6?
I think it's 3, 1, 4, 2, 6, 5, 7.
You think 2 comes after 4? You think 2 is the 4th best season?
2.
I think actually, you know what? I can agree with that. I can go with that.
2, 6, maybe 7, 5, 8. That's what I'm going with.
You think 5 is worse than 7?
You know what? I haven't rewatched it in a while, but I remember feeling like I hated 5. I just like.
I think you would like it a lot more.
I might be confusing
in
5 and 6, but we'll see. But that's where I'm at right now.
Okay. It's been a while since I've rewatched it either. I think I would need to go back to make a definitive decision on
5
this.
was the one with, a bunch of surprise stabbings because they were getting rid of characters at that point.
Right.
It's the one with Sansa's rape, which is really difficult to watch and really unnecessary for the way that they did that.
Yeah.
They got rid of Dorne. They got rid of.
What was the final? What was like the 9th episode of that one?
6 is Battle of the Bastards, right?
Yeah.
So 5, I don't remember. Hardhome, maybe. That was 8, 5, 8, right?
Yeah, I think that's and Hardhome is a very good
phenomenal
episode, and that you can have standouts in bad seasons, just like there is in season 2. So.
Maybe I put 5 above 7. I don't know. They're those ones are neck and neck.
I would put 5 above 7 just because 7 and 8 are so rushed, and there's that like 7 loses a lot of fucking points for that. Episode, whatever that, the second final episode, whatever it is, episode 6, I think.
Yeah, where they just go north.
It's just so dumb, and I think it's arguably the worst episode of the entire series.
Maybe I don't know about that, but whatever. It also gets points for the loot train battle, right? So that's cool.
Yeah,
it's the give and take. I think 1 and 3 are neck and neck for the top spot. 5 and 7 are neck and neck for the second worst spot, and 8 certainly. As much as there were cool moments this season, in the grand scheme of things,
it's just too. It was just not executed properly. It just wasn't executed.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's. I'd agree with that. Basically, I mean, a full rewatch of the entire series would benefit.
What's interesting now, knowing how it's all over. Now go back and rewatch.
Wait, it's all over.
now go back and then you'll look at all of Daenerys' scenes with a different perspective. Now, you probably will notice more foreshadowing, but it's still not to say that it's deserved, like it's earned. But I'm just saying you'll see things differently. Even when I do casually go to reread parts of the book, I'm looking at things differently now, knowing what I know. So,
which means your ability to just take in those new books, assuming they come. Will be altered, forever altered.
And that's one of the major tragedies here is like now, because this whole thing with Daenerys, I know it's coming. It's probably not coming till book 7. Everything I read from her in book 6 is going to be colored by that.
I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, to some degree.
Who knows?
I don't know. Okay, is there anything that we didn't touch on? We've been going for 2 hours.
Which is a little bit longer than we intended, but what are you going to do?
It's about double the length of what we intended.
That was short-sighted, though. There's no way. There's a lot of characters.
Well, yeah. All right. I guess since this is the last Game of Thrones episode.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, for now.
We've toyed around with other bonus ideas. Like I wanted to do an episode about the prophecies and those kind of things.
I think there's room for that. I think we need to give we need to let it breathe a little bit.
Yeah.
The cork has been fully removed from the Game of Thrones wine bottle. And now we need to let it aerate and breathe before we dive into some of those kind of.
I don't know if that analogy is great.
It's not great. It's not
because
great.
It's almost like all the wine's been poured at this point, right?
Yeah, right. And it's been drank too. Like we drank it all.
Yeah, we've consumed it all.
So
now you need to now what we're doing, we're kind of resting after dinner.
And maybe pee it all out.
I was thinking maybe there might be a dessert and like a port or something like that.
Oh, right. Yeah. I don't really like port.
No, well, nobody likes it.
I think some people like it.
A dessert wine or like something extra, because if following this analogy, which is weird to begin with,
food analogy. Yep.
The wine and the meal itself, that was the seasons. Now that's over. Dessert's an extra. You don't have to order dessert.
Right.
So there may be dessert, there may be a port, or maybe just like a cappuccino at the end.
Digestivo of some kind.
Maybe that too.
Yeah. I had a lovely digestivo yesterday at 4th. It was really good. Blanco Menta, I think is what it's called. And it's kind of like Jaeger, but like better, like much better.
Like a Fernet Branca sort of thing?
Yeah, but it's Fernet Blanco Menta. It's the same people.
Okay.
Different like mixture. It's much smoother because like Fernet Branca is very harsh. Fernet Blanco Menta is very, very smooth. So
cool.
Highly recommended if you find that anywhere to give that a shot. Anyway, that will be it for the wine cast. No, I mean, again, we said this last time, but thank you to everyone. And this is a bonus episode, so we'll probably lose a couple listeners here and there, and that's a shame. But we hope that you guys will stick around to take in the rest of the stuff. We have so much to cover. Like there's so many things we haven't talked about because Game of Thrones has just absorbed all of the time. But hopefully we'll get Jeremy back at some point. I mean, who knows?
There is technically, you may not be familiar, but there's a third person in this podcast.
Yeah.
doesn't do any of the Game of Thrones stuff, but he's really into like the Marvel stuff specifically, or the DC stuff.
He sat right next to where you're sitting right now and talked to a friend of ours about Endgame for, I think 3 straight hours.
While we were having the party?
Yeah. Vince,
longtime friend of the show as well.
Yeah, friend of the show. So anyway, thanks to everybody who's been along for the whole journey. It's been super fun. I think we're going to keep it going. We're going to keep it going. It's going to keep going. There is going to be more Game of Thrones episodes, but this is the last official like season 8 kind of thing. And then we'll touch on some other fun things down the road.
It'll be more like bonus, just random content that'll be Game of Thrones related.
Yep. So follow us on Twitter at Tower Babblecast, Facebook.com/Tower Babblecast. Head over to our website, towerbabble.ca, to find everything we do, including the what's going to be the future of Tower Babble. It's going to have everything that we're going to be doing. So like whenever we go see John Wick 3 and we review it, that'll be on there. Detective Pikachu, probably that'll be on there. We'll be doing. I'd like to be doing some more video game stuff soon. I think we'll maybe even be able to start doing some Twitch stuff. So that's all going to be available.
You guys
there.
Can witness me on Smash Brothers.
You'll have the
privilege
no one
of
cares,
watching a master.
No one cares. No one cares. Are you going to start a whole new profile like you did for Mortal Kombat?
I might have to. Yeah. I was top tier Mortal Kombat, guys. I was top 400 in the world at one point.
Top 400.
It's top tier. The tier starts at 500.
I heard someone say that they were top 7 in something. It's like, so you were 7 of 10, but you were clearly 7.
Yeah.
But top 7. I was top 7.
Anyways.
So that kind of stuff will be there. If you have any thoughts or comments, or if you have any ideas for any other Game of Thrones bonus content, towerbabblepodcast@gmail.com is where you're going to be able to send that into, or really anywhere, Instagram, on Twitter, Facebook, all those places. There's a million ways to reach us. We see them all, so have no problem with that. And we'll be doing more live stuff. I think what I'd like to do is record a lot of our regular Tower Babble stuff. We'll just do it live, and keep it basically the same. Just if people want to listen and tune in live, just give that an option.
Sure.
And
it has been very fun doing these live shows.
Yeah.
I love the interaction, so I'd like to keep that going. Yeah.
So yeah, I think it'll be good. So I hope you stick around and kind of live through this nerdy ass world that we're like absorbed in, and kind of. I'm losing the analogy here, but like
you didn't have one to begin with.
Seep off those. I don't know. I got nothing. Yeah. Anyway, we appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for the patrons, for helping support this season.
Yeah.
Dan, do you want to give a shout out to our $20 subscribers, please?
Yeah, definitely. Jesse Graves, Julie Abodili, Robin Lewis, Jeff Spicer, Thank you very much
Yep.
for all your support.
Exactly.
It means the world to us.
And we will be back presumably next week with a non-Game of Thrones related episode. You can expect that, and that'll be on the Tower of Babel podcast feed. So if you're subscribed only to the Game of Thrones one, and the way you can tell is if you look at the logo and it looks like it's aged, it looks like it's got like some beige and some browns in there. You know that, and it has the logo, like has the Game of Thrones kind of like sigils in the tower logo. Then you know that you only have the Game of Thrones feed. You can search for Tower of Babel in whatever podcast player of choice you have. There is a white logo with the black tower. That's the full one. You can still get all the Game of Thrones stuff. It all goes there. But it'll also have all the other fun stuff that we do. So stay tuned for that, and we will be back
Next week.
next week.
See you.